Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Lord's Day Holy Reading. Glad you could join us, and we're ready to go ahead and get going.
All right, welcome everybody here and online. Glad you could join us. Starting, believe it or not, week 9 of Thomas Manton's A Treatise of Self-Denial. The only scripture reference is Matthew 16:24. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. So we continue looking at Mr. Manton's teaching on self-denial. Last week we finished up the fourth of 4 points of the doctrine. That was to give us the means of self-denial, whereby this work may be made more easy. And now we've reached a pause before he comes to the particular kinds of self-denial. He has some observations concerning this duty, and there are 7 of them, and it's short enough that we can do all 7 today, Lord willing. And on number 7 has 3. It's broken down into 3 sections, and when we get to number 3 in that section, I will read it. But that's where we stop today, because that in itself breaks off into another section where he illuminates on self-denial in another way. So it's different than his sermon-oriented reading. So that's kind of where there's a natural break this time. So I think that's it to get started. Before I come, this is Mr. Manton, before I come to particular kinds of self-denial, take some observations. I will take some observations concerning this duty. If you would deny yourselves, number 1, everyone must observe his temper and the particular constitution of his own soul. Everyone's different, their temperament, their personality, makeup, we're all unique. And so he's talking about, that's the beginning of looking at what he's going to talk about here. There are several ways of sinning. Yes, let everyone look to his own way. Isaiah 53:6. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. God knows we are all out of the way, but usually there is some particular way of sin into which our hearts individually do wander and digress. We all probably know that. We have certain penchants, and he's going to go into that. Now when God tries any man, he tries him in his Isaac, in that type of scenario. Therefore self-denial must be considered according to the kind of self-love. Which way doth self-love most of all bend and incline your soul? The observation is necessary because there may be some kind of shadow of self-denial in carnal men. Lusts are obstinate, and because their contrariety will not give way one to the other, therefore, for the convenience of the grand lust, a carnal man, he says a man, but he's talking about a carnal man, may deny himself in something or a thing or two. There's a example to me came to mind. There's, in the world of entertainment, in rock and roll, we've had a couple of well-known people give up drugs and drinking and the whole 9 yards because their great lust is applause and fame and singing, and so they would rather keep doing what they're doing, but in order to satisfy their great lust, which is fame and continue to be applauded and everything, carnal men, so he brings that up, carnal men will give up a certain thing that is not at all concerning the morality of the person. A covetous man bereaves his soul of good and may be rigid and sullen in his nature, yet that may not have anything to do with denying himself. He just may have that disposition. He may deny himself of pleasure, but not of worldly profit. That's an example. Others that are of a draggy and voluptuous constitution of spirit, that means they're very low down. The drag, it's like that's from dregs, the dregs of society. It's the lowest of man. And voluptuous is the, we tend to think of it one way, but it's indulging to excess in sensual gratifications. So that others that are of a draggy, voluptuous constitution of spirit, they may be slight as to worldly profit when their hearts are caught up by another snare. Psalm 18 verse 23, David says, I kept myself from mine iniquity. Usually there is some special which by the frequency of temptation that often occurs, and our desires are that way, they call our sin. Now herein is that's when our uprightness is tried, when we can deny our sin. And Matthew Henry had a really short one here on Psalm 18:23, which again was, I was also upright before him, and I kept myself from my iniquity. Matthew Henry says, those that forsake the ways of the Lord depart from their God, but though conscious to themselves or to ourselves of many a false step, let there not be a wicked departure, total departure from our God. David kept his eye upon the rule of God's commands. Constant care to keep from that sin, whatever it be, which most easily besets us or him, proves that we are upright before God, taking special care, especially in that area. Number two, many may deny themselves in purpose. They may make declarations that they will not do this or that sin again, that yet fail when they come to act. Certainly in purpose, we must deny ourselves. We should be purposeful in nothing wrong with that part of it. Whenever we come to Christ, we must bring our lives and our comforts in our hands, ready to give them over. We must come with a resolution to part with all. Though every Christian be not a martyr, ending up that way in effect and act, yet he must be in vow and purpose and resolved to renounce all upon the just and convenient reasons of religion. Now the trial is when we are put upon these particular cases. We cannot so well judge of an affection by its single exercise as when it is brought to a direct conflict and trial. Anything can happen in one instance. The things of religion, in the absence of a temptation, may seem best to the soul. It's looking to be tempted, but then there's not that much of a struggle then. But the Spirit is never discovered till we come to an actual choice, and particulars are compared with particulars. Then desires which before lay hid and dormant rouse themselves and oppugn grace, which was, I was telling the guys here, that's a brand new word to me. OPPUGN, from back in Mr. Manton's day, which is to attack, to oppose, to resist. The Latin is related to fighting and your fist. So they lay hidden dormant, rouse themselves and attack and attack and resist grace in the civil wars of the soul. When there is a conflict between conscience and interest, then are we tried. Now you need not wish for these cases, for before you go out of the world, you will find they will come fast enough. Many cases will happen when duty is without encouragement. You're in a spell of maybe dryness, in the task of doing your duty, and all self-respects fail. Nay, when for conscience sake you are put upon visible disadvantage. You're doing what God is having you do, no matter what. Revelation 12, verse 11. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. So he's talking about that. It is said of the children of God that they loved not their lives to the death. When it came to this pinch, that either they must deny life or deny Christ, then they loved not their lives. Many may, in a prodigality of resolution, seem to lay all at Christ's feet, as we go after Peter again, as Peter in his confidence talked high, I will not deny thee, but yet afterward they may fail when they come to resist unto blood. Hebrews 12, verse 4, ye have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. Unquote. When you must make choice of the world or Christ, then are the best discoveries made. Rubber hits the road. Number 3, we are nothing in religion that cannot deny pleasure and the delicacy of life. For this is the constant and private self-denial of a Christian, which is always necessary. I kind of pondered the way he put that. To me, you're not out there beating, I could be wrong, but you're not out there beating your chest that I'm denying myself in this, that way or the other. It's between you and the Lord. But that may not be totally what he's talking about. But all sin is rooted in a love of pleasure more than of God. All sin is rooted in a love of pleasure more than of God. For therefore do we sin, because of the contentment we do imagine to be in sin that draws on the heart to the practice of it. Now he that cannot abjure, renounce his contentment is nothing. Proverbs 25, verse 28, he that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. The meaning is, he that cannot subdue his inclination to pleasure doth lie open to every temptation. As an unwalled town in time of war receives every army that comes, so is his soul, it lies obvious to temptation. And besides, pleasures will necessarily bring a brawn upon the heart, which means a toughness as opposed to a tenderness. Bring a brawn upon the heart, they are so contrary to the severity of religion. Seneca, who is a Roman philosopher and statesman, not a Christian, said, certainly it is necessary that he should have low thoughts of duty, but hath high thoughts of pleasure and to gratify his senses. And Manton is going to point out here, and is starting to point out that even man in general has often seen through the years that to deny yourself if you're going to attain anything. How much more should we do that for the Lord? So again, Seneca said, certainly it is necessary that he should have low thoughts of duty, someone doing their duty, that hath high thoughts of pleasure and to gratify his senses. If God had required nothing of us but the perfection of reason, which is what was Seneca's goal was, if God had nothing but that, expected nothing but that from us, if we were only to show ourselves men, there still must be a bridle upon appetite and sensual desires. There is an old quarrel between appetite and reason. Nature itself, this sums it up, would suggest such arguments to us as would put us upon the mortification of the senses. So it just points out how much more Christians should be devoted to that. Number 4, if you would deny yourselves, you must deny yourselves in point of desire as well as in point of enjoyment. Titus 2 verse 12. No, he just references a small It's part of it, but Titus 2:12, denying ungodliness and worldly lusts. The great part of this duty consists in mortifying and subduing worldly lusts, that we may be content with our portion, though but a little of the world, if God seeth us fit for no more. It is a high point of self-denial, not only to part with what we have, but to be content with what we have. When the soul comes to this, to say, I have enough, because I have as much as God allotteth me, and because God seeth it fit, I should have no more. To be content with a little of the world and not to desire more, it is the poor man's duty as well as the rich. And so, as a rich man is to quit his possessions when God calls him, so a poor man is to quit, mortify, and subdue his desires. Covetousness, when once it prevails upon the heart, it desires, it grasps, it aims at the whole world. And I've never really thought about this scripture in this way, but it's a good point. Therefore Christ saith in Matthew 16, verse 26, if a man should gain the whole world, implying that is the aims of men. When a man's break out that way, he will never be satisfied. Solomon saith in Ecclesiastes 5, verse 10, he that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver. The heart of a man is largely drawn out, so that, like the grave, we shall never be able to say it is enough. To enjoy complacency in our portion, it is a great part of self-denial. So we may have looked at this one before, but I thought that there was maybe here in some respect. And complacency today is thought of in a different manner. But historically, it was pleasure, satisfaction, gratification. It is more than approbation and less than delight or joy. And then it talks about complacence. It's the French word complaisance, which is really what Mr. Manton is getting at here. And that down below here, complacence in the French is a pleasing deportment, courtesy, that manner of address and behavior in social intercourse which gives pleasure, civility, obliging, condescension, kind and affable reception and treatment of guests, exterior acts of civility, as the gentleman received us with complacence. Condescension is another aspect of complacence. Obliging compliance with the wishes or humors of others. Number 3, desire of pleasing disposition to oblige, the principle for the act. So, in that respect, to enjoy all of that in our portion, doing all that, what I just read, is a great part of self-denial, even if you don't feel like doing it. To desire more, it is but to desire more snares. If I had more, I should have more trouble, more snares, more duty. Greater gates do but open to more care. I should have more to account for. You will. More time and more opportunity. And alas, there you go. I cannot answer for what I have already. He's talking about somebody like that. You know, your hands are full the way it is. If a plant be starved, I liked this. If a plant be starved in the valleys, it will never thrive on the mountains. So if in a low condition we are not able to conquer the temptation of it, what shall we do if we had more, if we cannot be responsible to God for what we have? Number 5, very eye-opening. Well, I guess not eye-opening. It's really obvious in some ways. Vainglory is as sordid a piece of and as much to be denied as affectation of riches, desiring of riches, and worldly greatness. And I looked up vainglory is in Webster's. Exclusive vanity, excited by one's own performance empty pride, undue elation of mind. You know, patting yourself on the back, going, man, Mr. Peck, that was great, wasn't it? So, not good. Vainglory is as sordid a piece of self and as much to be denied as affectation of riches and worldly greatness. That's saying a lot. Covetousness, that carries a man to another object, but vainglory to another end. The one makes us idolaters and the other hypocrites. An idolater sets up another god, and a hypocrite denies the true God, worshiping yourself. For Mark, God, by reason of the excellency of his being, is to be the highest object of our respect. And because he is the supreme cause, he is to be the ultimate end of all our actions. And when we set up another end, especially ourselves, we deny God his prerogative. Number 6, this is really good. We are to deny ourselves not only in case of temptation to direct sin, when something's confronting you in the here and now, when either we must thus deny ourselves or actually sin in that moment, but also in the whole overall tenor of life, but also for the general advantage of duty and obedience and the conveniency of a holy life. For instance, I am to deny my pleasure not only when reason may be grossly discomposed, when even the average heathen would be outraged by something. Not only by refusing such works of the flesh as stink in the nostrils of nature, but I am to deny my pleasure lest I be unfitted for duty, lest insensibly I contract a distemper and a brawn, again a toughness of the heart, upon my heart. And so I am to deny riches, not only not to seek them by unlawful means. That's not the only sin, but it's also when I cannot keep them with a good conscience, and not to lay out the strength of my spirits in the pursuit of them, that it may not intersect the vigor and strength of my soul, which should be reserved for communion with God. So I'm to deny honors, that is, not only ambitious affectation of them, but if you're being honored honorably, I guess, but when they will make me to lose the pleasant opportunity of devout retirement and a religious privacy with God. And riches are to be denied not only when they choke conscience, but when they choke the word. And number 7, in the work of self-denial, there must be special regard be had to the seasons wherein we live. This is very good. In several cases. Number 1, in doubtful times, when God seems to threaten judgment. So we need a special regard when there's a special season and a special time that's pretty evident to us. Then our heart must be more loose from worldly comforts than at other times, and we must deny ourselves of those comforts which at other times a man may take. Our Savior reproacheth the scribes and Pharisees for not discerning the seasons. It is a great fault of Christians when they do not regard the season and time of God's displeasure. For instance, Jeremiah 45 verses 4 and 5, that which I have built will I break down, and that which I have planted I will pluck up, even this whole land. And seekest thou great things for thyself? Seek them not. Unquote. Oh, I'm sorry. I am pulling down, saith God, and plucking up, and for men, okay, I guess this is Manton, forgot. I am pulling down, saith God, and plucking up, and for men to mind worldly greatness and honors and the conveniences of the outward life, when the face of the times looks toward judgment, when we may see a storm in the black clouds, then to think of building, planting, and advancing ourselves, it is most unseasonable and horrid security. This the Spirit of, so he clarifies here, this the Spirit of God takes notice of in the men that lived in the days of Noah. It is said, they ate and drank and married. All these things, are necessary, for the supportation of mankind. But when they minded these things and had no regard to the season, see the storm in the clouds. At such a time when God seems to begin his controversy with a nation, whatever we do, we should do it with caution and fear. For the more we busy ourselves in the world, the more snares do we draw upon ourselves. God looketh that we be observant of the season, and not seek after honors and ease and plenty. When judgments are coming, our hearts should be most weaned then, when the face of the sky doth begin to lower and thicken towards a storm. That was subpoint 1 of 7. Subpoint 2, when we are like to put a stumbling block in the way of a new convert. 2 Kings 5, verse 26, the prophet speaking to Gehazi when he ran after Naaman for a gift, quote, "Is this a time, prophet, to receive money and to think of vineyards and olive yards?" I'll read the whole because he did a partial. And he said unto him, "Went not my heart with thee when the man turned again from his chariot to meet thee? Is it a time to receive money and to receive garments and olive yards and vineyards and sheep and oxen, men servants and maidservants?" The prophet doth not so much rebuke Gehazi for the unseasonableness of motion, that it might bring disgrace upon the honor and high calling of the prophet, and dishonor the God of Israel. We must depart from our own conveniency in such cases. It is a great stumbling block to the world when they that pretend to reformation seek honors, profits, great places, and preferments for themselves and their families. All pious designs must have a suitable carriage. In Austin's time, which I tried to find what he was talking about there, but I couldn't, who that is. It was a scandal against the Christians and the heathens. It was a scandal against the Christians, and the heathens soon took up that reproach, that they overturned the idols not out of any piety or devotion, but covetousness, that they might have the gold. Reformers of all men should be content with the goodness of the action. And had a Matthew Henry on, I'm just going to read a little part at the top and then a section here on this first page. 2 Kings 5, verses 20 through 27. Naaman, a Syrian, a courtier, a soldier, had many servants, and we read how wise and good they were. 2 Kings 5, verse 13. Elisha, a holy prophet, a man of God, has but one servant, and he proves a base, lying, naughty fellow. Number 1, Gehazi's sin. It was a complicated sin. Number 1, the love of money, that root of all evil, was at the bottom of it. His master contemned Naaman's treasures, but he coveted them, Gehazi. 2 Kings 5, verse 20, his heart, says Bishop Hall, was packed up in Naaman's chest. He must run after him to fetch it. Multitudes, by coveting worldly wealth, have erred from the faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. Number 2, he blamed his master for refusing Naaman's present, condemned him as foolish in not taking gold when he might have it, envied and grudged his kindness and generosity to this stranger, though it was for the good of his soul. In short, he thought himself wiser than his master. Point 3, when Naaman, like a person of accomplished manners, alighted from his chariot to meet him, in 2 Kings 5:21, he told him a deliberate lie that his master sent him to him, and so he received that courtesy to himself that Naaman intended to his master. 4, he abused his master and basely misrepresented him to Naaman as one that had soon repented of his generosity, that was fickle and did not know his own mind, that would say and unsay, swear and unswear, that would not do an honorable thing, but he must presently undo it again. His story of the 2 sons of the prophets was as silly as it was false. If he would have begged a token for 2 young scholars, surely less than a talent of silver might serve them. 5, there was a danger of his alienating Naaman from that holy religion, which is what Manton was referring to, which he had espoused, and lessening his good opinion of it. he would be ready to say, as Paul's enemies suggested concerning him, that though Elisha himself did not burden him, yet being crafty, he caught him with guile, sending those that made a gain of him. We hope that he understood afterwards that Elisha's hand was not in it, and that Gehazi was forced to restore what he had justly got, else it might have driven him to his idols again. So it's an important point not to give a bad black mark on your walk in faith that someone else will see. I mean, it's just beyond. So number 3, subpoint 3, in prosperous times of the church, there is much self-denial to be practiced. I confess self-denial is chiefly for suffering times, for so it is in the text, let him deny himself and take up the cross. These two are coupled together, that when a cross meets us in our way, which we cannot avoid without some hazard of conscience, then we must deny ourselves. But, however, it is a duty that is always in season. And so, next week, he says, I shall show you wherein this self-denial is to be practiced in prosperous times. And he has 5 points on that will, Lord willing, cover next time as we continue along. So may the Lord bless you, and may we contemplate all that was taught today and take it. Glad you could join us. Please join us next week if you can.
All right. Thank the Lord. And is everyone online? Glad you could join us. And Lord willing, we'll talk to you again soon.